Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the benefit of drawing from the life-giving waters of spirit as opposed to clinging to the false sense of mortality. Listeners, we discuss the Omnipresent Divine Principle, which is functioning everywhere, always, for those with activated spiritual sense. In this show, we will explain the value of developing a spiritual practice to gain access to the divine self. Fear, also known as false experienced as real, is a defense mechanism for the belief in a mortal existence. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and live without fear. So I see the title of today's show is Inspiration to Destroy Fear. Let's give a good description of what we mean by that title.
Yeah, I think we really want to focus on this idea of inspiration, and especially the inspiration that destroys fear. Fear being the defense mechanism to protect the false sense of self. As long as we are controlled by fear, we're in the trap. The Bible tells us perfect love casts out fear, but so do lots of other things. Alcohol, drugs, stupidity. So there is a difference between motivation and inspiration that we must become sensitive to. Know the difference between sowing to the spirit and sowing to the flesh. And so in this model, we really want to make the difference or distinction between motivation, which for the most part is fear-based driven behavior. Most of us were individualized by the world mind. We believe we're a finite mortal being. We believe in two powers. We're hypnotized, and we are controlled by fear. Now, inspiration, that's what the Bible is talking about. Perfect love. Having this sense of connectedness to something that is pure, powerful, sacred, everywhere, always, absolutely no need. That's the peace that comes with knowing the truth. Life is perfect, it's whole, it's complete. And to rest in that knowledge becomes your first line of defense. It's all you will ever need is to know the truth. But in order to know the truth, we need the mind of Christ. We have to graduate from thinking with our five corporeal senses and developing spiritual sense.
So Swami, let's go back and just describe what it looks like when we have this false sense of self. What is it you can tell us would be these warning signals for us to come to these understandings?
Making a distinction between being individualized by world mind versus being individualized by divine mind. Mary Baker Eddy called this being individualized by world mind as thought handled by animal magnetism, and she knew it as the difference between the wolf and the wolf in sheep's clothing. We all understand evil, sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation. These are all things we're trying to move away from. But when it comes to human satisfaction, this worldly sense of peace and this worldly sense of success, becomes the wolf in sheep's clothing. A lot of us, we're motivated when things aren't going so well. And once that turns around and we start to get more of the pleasures and profits of the human experience, then we think we're being rewarded by the divine creative principle. And so that's as far as we go. But if we don't understand life and matter must be given up for life and spirit, and what is that going to look like when I'm actually doing it? When I'm born again of spirit, I and the Father are one. And without leadership, it becomes very difficult. The reason why I really like Christian Science is because it puts healing on the table. The idea of inspiration and demonstration. If you are conscious of the divine creation, then you should be externalizing divine qualities. Peace, love, joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, patience, temperance. This is all that is available to you. And so consciousness is experience. We use what we are experiencing to let us know what we are conscious of.
Well, it sounds like she really knew the difference between the wolf and the wolf in sheep's clothing. That's something that we have to come to a realization about as we put the microscope under our own ways of thinking.
Yeah, and I think to maybe expand on what you're saying, we have something here from Gilbert Carpenter, Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps, Chapter 7, to help explain this wolf in sheep's clothing. Would you read that for us, please?
Sure, I'll begin. When is animal magnetism the most subtle? When it works in the dark and takes on the appearance of a gentle, harmless lamb? Yes. Then the soldier of God is battling with the greatest subtlety, in danger of the last straw of being misunderstood. The one who fights thus is robbed in two ways. The world says that he or she did not have the courage to fight a single lamb without making a great complaint and fuss. Also, when the victory comes, nobody believes it to be of any significance. Hence, the world at large is robbed of the knowledge of the Goliath that was overcome, as well as the spiritual help needed to rout the enemy. The Master said, "I have overcome the world." Such a statement means little to uninspired thought because Jesus referred to the mental victory, which none can comprehend but those spiritually enlightened. Yet, from the standpoint of divine mind, the mental victory is the only one that has any real value, since in reality, what man has to overcome is neither a wolf nor a wolf in sheep's clothing, but the illusion which causes him to believe either that he has some mighty evil power to destroy, or else, because of apparent harmony, that God is in control. Hence, he has nothing to do. End of the quote.
This is one of the things we're starting to come up against, the idea we are already spiritual. Things that you see posted on the internet, like there are no spiritual practices that can bring you closer to what you already are. The very notion of seeking implies a separation that doesn't truly exist. Every attempt to enhance or adopt the personal experience merely reinforces the illusion of individuality, perpetuating the appearance of separation. Things like this, even though they are on some level correct, there really is nothing that ever happens. We have to understand the unreal never becomes real, and life and matter must be given up for life and spirit. Until we initiate this process, the separation, the journey, and the return, and we actualize the experience. Practice makes perfect only when practice is perfect, but only reason walks through the open door of revelation. It's not going to happen by itself. We will stay indefinitely in the cycle of death and rebirth. Once we are hypnotized, we remain in this belief in two powers until at some point we awaken and we know the truth. Life is perfect. There is no personal sense of life. But as Jesus told us in the book of John, soon it will be night when no one can work. Now it is day. I must do the work of him that has sent me. Once we have incarnated and we have a physical form, we have a pass card. If we use this, if we use our external experiences, we can awaken in the truth. We can know the difference between what is unreal and what is real. Once the body expires, then it is night when no one can work. So it's good to use this human experience to help you work out your own salvation, only to find there is no you at all. There is no mortal sense of life. But it's one thing to say that. It is another thing to know it, to understand it, and to demonstrate it.
So when you use the phrase that reason walks through the open door of revelation, let's discuss what that really means.
In John 10:1, Jesus says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep." Then in John 10:9, he says, "I am the door. By me, if any man entereth in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture." End of the quote. The door is the mystical eye, spiritual identity, the realization of one being, one perfect divine life, looking at itself, as itself, of itself, and to itself. And as Jesus said, you can't serve two masters. So we can't have a personal sense of self and be the one perfect divine being. In this oneness, there can't be two, which means the personal sense of self must be given up. Paul would call this to die daily. To understand how to do that, how do you give up this personal sense of self? One of the great parables is Lazarus. I have a soundbite here that I'll play to use the symbolism of the resurrection of Lazarus to help us understand what we are doing. Let's unbox it. Lazarus is the purified human consciousness. Martha is the physical appearance of matter and form we call body. Mary is the belief and concept we call finite mortal mind. Jesus is Christ, the saving aspect of truth. Let's start. The sisters write Jesus to alert him, symbolizing a stirring in the mind-body complex, seeking the divine self. Lazarus is put in the tomb. The false sense of self must be buried in the silence and stillness of divine revelation before Christ can come to the purified human consciousness. Martha greets Jesus. Matter and form are attuned to the divine idea. Martha goes within and gets Mary. Mary comes out. Belief and concept are attuned to the divine idea. Martha and Mary present Lazarus to Jesus. And Christ comes to Lazarus and calls the purified consciousness out as the risen Christ. The joining of spirit with truth brings the light of divine eternal life, revealing the nothingness of anything unlike divine perfection.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Asana class is a module fitting into the master plan, leading the practitioner to the experience of total consciousness. by attuning the mind-body complex to the divine idea, a system of exercises designed to use the physical appearance to determine individual level of consciousness and degree of awareness, starting with the process of lengthening and strengthening muscles to bring bones into the position of internal support. We educate thought up to spiritual apprehension, because when spirit is cause, it calls into expression the beauty of holiness, making creation perfect. Mountain pose may not bring you truth in consciousness, but truth in consciousness must bring mountain pose. Visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, the soundbite that we just played about the story of Lazarus, how can we apply that to our daily lives?
Well, what we're talking about here, only reason walks through the open door of revelation, that we must master the mind-body complex before we can put the purified human consciousness in the tomb so that Christ comes and calls us out. This is all symbolism for an internal event that we must learn to demonstrate. The absence of fear doesn't mean the presence of divine truth. This is why Mary Baker Eddy suggested inspiration and demonstration, because divine truth in consciousness resolves things into thoughts and exchanges the objects of sense for the divine idea. The key question is, am I sowing to the mental material concept, or am I sowing to the divine truth? Spirit testifies with deeds. We want to reveal the truth, which is the omnipresence, the perfection of being, functioning everywhere, always.
Let's talk more about this concept of fear. I realize that fear can mean many different things to many different people. For example, we fear for our children. We fear of not being liked, fear of losing our jobs. How do we overcome these fears in our human existence?
Well, I think that's the biggest problem today, is we manage the fear rather than grow psychologically and spiritually. The idea here is to rebirth the body in the life force, in spirit, to know the truth. There is no mortal sense of life. That offers you a solution rather than just relief. When you look at somebody's behavior today, what we call normal, people go from the car to the phone to the computer to the refrigerator to the gym, and it's all driven by this need, this unconscious need that I want something. Well, there's an innate drive in all of us. We want to be whole. We want to be complete. But completion can't take place in the mental material world of energy because it isn't there. It's duality. Everything there is in half. Even mathematically, if your goal is to go from point A to point B, and you can make as many moves as you want, but you can only go one half the distance with each move, you may become rapidly close, infinitely close, and then frustrated as all get out because you're never going to reach point B. You can never find a number you can't multiply by 0.5. And so this is the confinement, the limitation, the frustration that we all go through. But in order to find solution for this, we must learn to transform. And in order to do this, you follow the instruction of Scripture. You must be born again of spirit. Spirit is whole, it's complete, it's invisible, intangible. But until we master the mind-body complex, internalize a new image in the body comes in with a pattern. It's looking for food, mother, approval, for validation. And that's okay between infancy and age 7. which was called the age of reason. When you reached age 7, you had to separate from this pattern that we come in with, what they called mother, this fear. I could die. I'm going to die. And then once you have this inner marriage, once you separate from being individualized by the world mind, and now you have this mystical marriage where you internalize the invisible, intangible omnipresence as your symbol for validation. That enables you to manage the fear very successfully, but it also qualifies you now to walk this mind-body complex through the open door of revelation, where we now surrender life in matter for life in spirit. We give up the mortal, finite sense of self, this personal sense of self, and we accept spiritual identity. And with that comes responsibility. I always think of the bodhisattva, the one who has attained enlightenment, but chooses to incarnate because true enlightenment doesn't happen until every sentient being crosses the threshold of this level of consciousness. The generic reason for incarnation is to glorify the Creator, to know the truth. Life is perfect, whole, complete. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Fear not, it is I.
So let's use one of the examples I had mentioned earlier. So let's just say I have a fear of losing my job. Is that another way of saying I believe in something other than this divine principle for my abundance?
Yeah, as we start to unbox this and you think about it, the origins of the fear is need. And I need a job because I need to eat, I need to feed myself. And the real solution comes when we come out of the belief in mortality, the belief there is a finite mortal being looking for or that has needs. That's the one-size-fits-all solution to all fear. What happens with this is we hear the truth. God is all is good. And so before we know this to be true, we believe in the allness of the divine creation that God provides. Everything is going to work out. Now, like Mary Baker Eddy said, for Jesus to walk water was science. But until poor humanity walks water, for them to step out onto the Atlantic is neither wisdom nor science. Until you know the truth, until you are conscious of the divine truth, and you are receiving revelation, you are inspired by the divine principle, and you are proving it, living under the influence of spiritual awareness, the grace of God, then you need not think about your job. But for those oftentimes that hear this kind of theory and they believe in it, and then all of a sudden they start to, quote unquote, trust God, trust that the universe will provide for them, they find that it's a hit or miss thing because they don't know the truth. They don't know God aright. They're not receiving revelation. They are living under the influence of mortal imagination. They're still living from the mind that can't bring forth the divine image. They haven't rebirthed the mind-body complex in the divine idea. And so they're still under the law of karma, which is material law. What we put out is what we get back. For every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Now, we have to master that, and we have to understand the truth, because to do things scientifically, you have to know the principle and then the rule, how to apply the principle, and then you live from grace.
Like what you said earlier, the key question we should be asking ourselves, are we sowing to the mental material concept, or are we sowing to this divine truth? And I think when we answer that, then that can help us start this path of realization.
Right. And then, of course, what's the standard that we live to? I mean, am I proving the presence of the divine creation? Life is perfect. It's whole. It's complete. Do I understand the principle? And do I understand the rule? We tested inspiration and demonstration. It's not an easy thing to do. And there are a lot of things that must be in place in order for us to successfully live under the protection of divine law, even though it's the only reality. It's the only thing that's here. But if you're not demonstrating, you walk defenselessly among these non-existent powers that will seem to kill your false sense of self.
So getting back to what Jesus said, I have overcome the world. I mean, I think we'd all would love to be able to say those words. What's the first thing that we need to do?
Yeah, for me, the first step is always believe in the divine creation. Start with the principle. Life is perfect, it's whole, it's complete. And then start to demonstrate. Do you have dominion over this world? Can you say to the proud wave thus far, and it stops? The message of the Christ is heal the sick, reform sinner, raise the dead. Do we have these capabilities? And until we do, chances are that we're still living out from the influence of world mind. We're still individualized by world thought. And we haven't overcome this world, and we don't have the mind of Christ, but we think we do. And so by proving your understanding of this divine principle, at least now you can do the work of him that has sent you. Because soon it will be night when no one can work.
So belief would be like the first step in developing the spiritual practice?
Well, I think belief is the level playing field. We believe in God. We believe we're a finite mortal being. We believe in two powers. We believe in the devil. To really grow psychologically and spiritually, you would really want a complete holistic health management system today, because if you don't have all of the pieces and you're left to your own devices without a path of action, things that you can and you must do, without a path of knowledge, understanding how creation is taking place in accordance with the law of opposites, and without a path of devotion, dedication, determination, your chances of having this happen to you become slim to none. And so I would suggest that you do get those things in place, a path of action, a path of knowledge, a path of devotion. And to understand that today you're going to have to work with skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, skillful use of food, skillful use of exercise. Because faithful and orderly with the objects of sense is what's going to make us receptive to the deeper things of the divine principle. Like attracts like. Perfection seeks perfection. Imperfection seeks imperfection. So if you want the truth, you must strive for your highest understanding of right, of good.
Well, that completes our show for today. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages as you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you can press to further your understandings. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Yeah, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and live without fear. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.